Mary Clare, thanks very much for joining us today.
Sure.
Would you be able to tell us about your experience applying for the Spanish entrepreneur visa?
I decided to move to Spain. I didn't know I wanted to live in Europe. And I put a bunch of places in a spreadsheet, and Spain just came up the winner. And one of the things was that it did seem like it would be relatively easy to get an entrepreneur visa as compared to other countries. I had it's actually kind of funny, right when I decided that I was going to move here, the New York Times published an article about a woman that had received a Spanish entrepreneur visa, and it just said that basically that it could be done. It said nothing about the process or anything like that. So I had three friends of mine within like a day email me the article, and I said, okay, I'm gonna try. So I just came in on a tourist visa. As an American citizen, you get a 3-month Schengen visa. You can just show up at the border and give them your passport, and that's what I did. And then of course I was very slow to respond and to actually do anything. I should have just come here and hit the ground running. So I don't advise what my approach was to other people. I should have just had the business plan written up, but I couldn't really do much prior research from the US because back then there was nothing online about it because it was still very new. So anyway, so I got here and I just tried to figure out how to do it, and it involved, there was nothing in English back. I figured out the whole process, and what it was is essentially I had to write a business plan. Um, and the thing is with this is you have to demonstrate that your business is either some way innovative in nature or that it is going to generate jobs. And they have a few key factors. This hasn't changed since of what's considered strategic to the Spanish government. And those are anything technology related, aerospace and defense, renewables, biotech. Mine was basically consumer tech. I actually originally was going to make an app to make a like a Spanish yoga exercise app, which actually it would have been great. It probably would have worked really well because that was before there was anything like that even back in the US. So that was what I was going to do. And what they did is back then you submitted in 2 steps. You submitted the business plan for approval, and then I got a letter that said it was approved. It was within the time limits that they laid out. They originally laid out in very stringent time limits. I think it's like 20 days you have, it's either 20 or 30 business days that you have to have, that they have to respond legally. Those, my understanding, have really slid a lot, but especially with COVID. But back then they got the business plan back to me in the approval level in a pretty timely fashion. And then what you did back then is then you submitted like a police record just saying I had a clear police report, proof of health insurance. That's a big one. The Spanish government has a massive fear because this happened, I think it was back in the 90s, that they had a whole bunch of people come from South America in, and then they weren't legal, but they still had health insurance because they had universal health insurance. It was a massive drain on the budget. So they're terrified about that right now. So that's something that's super important. But you have to have health insurance and then proof that could sustain myself for 2 years as far as financially goes, although the barrier for that is quite low. It's like, even now, it's not much over 600 euros a month that you need to demonstrate. And I think that was it. And I had all that translated into Spanish. So anyway, and then you had to have the letter showing that your business plan was approved. So then you submit that back, and then you get a piece of paper saying that you received your residency. And that was something that I never really understood what happened, because if you're already a resident and your visa is processing, you're legal. Like I applied to renew mine back in November for the third time, and it's still processing. But because I live here legally, I'm still considered legal. But anyway, so I was really worried about that. So I kept emailing because they would never get back to me. And then finally, for some reason, after like 2 or 3 weeks of emailing, I got a letter saying that an email saying that my case had been expedited, and then a number of like a personal cell phone number of someone that I could report to. And anyway, I got that letter within like a day after that happened. And then you just go and then you take that to a police station and they make you an identity card. Well, then after you get your identity card, well, if you're an entrepreneur, then you have to figure. So the way that the entrepreneur visa works, and this is a lot of people I don't think really understand this, and is that it's not necessarily saying that like you have to have your business up and running right away and be making money. The idea is of it is that you were given, if you're doing it from apply from abroad, you get 1 year and then you have to renew it. If you apply inside of Spain, you get 2 years and have to renew it. But basically that time is given for you to set up your business. So as it doesn't even have to be really making that much money, you just have to show that you are able to support yourself and get that going. So after that, so I decided what kind of, just took a little while to decide what kind of corporate structure that I wanted, because if you're an autonomo, or I mean, if you're a freelancer, you can have something called an autonomo, which basically you start out paying, I think it's like 50 euros a month, and then it scales up over a period of 18 months to 300 euros a month. Well, mine's like 304 euros a month. But anyway, everyone gets really upset and they think that that's really expensive. Compared to other freelance fees in other countries. And I guess I take the American approach that for me, 305 euros to have completely free access to one of the best healthcare systems in the world, and after 15 years into it, a paid pension, seems like a pretty good deal to me. So that's why I do it. As I said, there's different, but there's also a lot of people, I think, there's a lot of expats here who come because they're married to another expat and their business is like a hobby. So for them, and then they're under like their spouse's health insurance. So for them, yeah, it probably is a little expensive if they're not really working that much. But for someone like me, I think it's a very viable option. So, and then after that, you can also file a Spanish corporation. But opening a Spanish corporation isn't like opening one in the US or even in the UK. You know, in the US, it's like, I've done it in both countries. It's like literally like 10 minutes. And in the UK, it's like a couple hours of filling out boring forms on the internet, but it's still, they're really quite easy and it really requires no overhead. Where here you have to invest, it's a few thousand euros, and just show that that's able, and they have to put it, I believe, in a bank account, and then you have legal fees associated with it, and you got to get a lawyer to do it and a whole bunch of other stuff. So I've actually continued with the autonomo route. I'm making enough that I probably should do a Spanish company because there'll be some tax advantages to that. But right now I've just kept it there. So anyway, so you get yourself set up and figure out your legal status of your business, and then you start making money. Well, as I said, originally my business concept was to open an app, like an exercise app, which obviously with COVID now, they're like all the rage. But it was with one with yoga. And there isn't one, I mean, there isn't really any like that in Spain, but that was my original concept. But then when I got here and I started looking, and I did a lot of, well, I done the due diligence for the business plan, obviously, but I checked yoga pricing, and a lot of different factors. And it's interesting, by that time, I had already started getting a lot of work, people requesting me to help them with their marketing, because I had small businesses in New York City and I used to market those. And once I quit doing that, I had a lot of people, like even before I came here, like someone called me into their offices, one of like my private yoga clients, and they were like, can you make some websites for our businesses? And I'm like, okay, that's a good idea. And then people kept asking me, so I kind of organically developed this other business on the side. So I actually just started doing that in lieu of starting the yoga app. And it's worked out really well organically. And I just realized, I don't know if I want it. It's hard work to having a brick and mortar business. It really is. And there would have been an element of that involved with it to launch it, just as far as being able to create jobs here and employ people. I didn't know if I wanted to get into that. It's something that probably could have worked better now. But I don't know. I was just enjoying just being able to work freelance and, helping people with their social media platforms and their SEO. And I just never really pursued it. So the issue came in when it came up for renewal, right? Yeah, because the way that it works is you get 2 years to set up the business. And this was another thing that like no one knew because no one had done this before. But I basically went and knocked on a whole bunch of people's doors and like marched into all these bureaucracies. And they said that I could do it as a renewal as opposed to starting the process over again, but it would have to be my new business and I would roll it over instead of an entrepreneur visa. I made the decision to roll it over to a freelance visa they're almost the same, but the entrepreneurial visa has it's a lot higher thresholds for creativity as far as something new, whereas I didn't think that digital marketing was all that creative to me. So I thought it was the safer bet was to roll it over that way and do a freelance visa. And then it's the same thing. It's basically the same process. It's just that they have a quasi-independent body that you can submit your business plan to first, where you don't have that with the entrepreneur visa. And then they'll offer suggestions on that. You know, like I had, like, you know, I have clients from all over the world. So, but in my business plan, I had different projections in dollars and currencies in different markets. So like, no, everything has to be in euros. And so like little things like that I had to fix, but it was pretty easy to roll it over. And I know someone else who did the same thing. He wrote, he had an entrepreneur visa and then he rolled it over to freelance. But yeah, it's about the same. But it was relatively easy to roll it over. And then they decided, I finally figured out, like, they actually determined that, like, my business is strategic to the Spanish government. I did put a little bit about it, like how I help Spanish people access international markets because they're not good at that. I would say that there's two things. The main one is the main difference in the freelance visa is there's no time limit for them to process the visa. So, okay, so for example, when I did my entrepreneur visa originally, I applied in late May, and I had all the documents by 2 months, and I was ready to go. But there was no external review board. Whereas this one with the freelance visa, the first time I renewed it, I applied to renew it in June of 2017. And because I was told that was all I was needed was a month. And that's because I went to the entrepreneur visa people. But that's theoretically, big word theoretically, that's all they need for the entrepreneur visa. Whereas the freelance visa, all bets are off. So I didn't get mine until, they didn't give me any paperwork on it until November. June, July, August, October, 5 months later. And then I like missed a social security payment because I changed bank accounts, because it's not easy to change a bank account. It's very complicated. But because they're not flexible. And so then once I paid that, I figured out how to pay that. That was the tricky part. And then I paid that. Then I got my new card in late November. And then contrasting it with rolling it over, so my visa was up last November. So they sent me a letter, and I called people. I'm like, well, how do I renew it? They're like, oh, you'll just receive a letter. And I was like, yeah, right. But sure enough, I received the letter. And I think I received the letter in, I can't remember if it was late September or early October, but it was really easy to renew it. I'm actually still shocked how easy it was. They sent you a piece of paper, and I just checked the box to reply it, sign my name. I had to pay, I think it was a 70 euro tax.
What would you say that made a business plan succeed, both for the entrepreneur route and for the freelancer route?
I think they considered it tech, and both were considered tech. None of them really created significant jobs. I think it was because, a little bit what I said earlier, I think that I was demonstrated that I have a portfolio of international clients, so that's money coming into Spain that they can tax. Number one, and number two, I do have a portfolio of Spanish clients that I've helped access international markets, and so I think it's because of those two reasons, right? So I think they just saw that I could help facilitate money coming into Spain.
That was at a concept stage, wasn't it? At the yoga app, you hadn't actually built the app yet.
No, I had not. However, I did a lot of, they want an old-fashioned business plan. They don't want these new-fashioned, 5-pagers that all the tech firms, and you go and someone gives you $1 trillion market valuation based upon. They don't want that. They want an old-fashioned, old-school business plan, and they want a thorough market analysis. And I'm an economist by background and used to be a financial analyst, so I did all of that. Like I did a full sets of financial projections. And I did it like I basically did Wall Street style financial projections. So I did 5 years, broken down monthly and then quarterly. And as I said, I did a thorough market analysis, and there wasn't really anything online at that time, but I did do analysis of like all the different, I did yoga, and then I also expanded that to other fitness as well, and talked about why I think that they were basically complementary markets and oftentimes overlapped. So I would say my business plan, if I remember correctly, I think it was 24 pages long. The idea was to market it here, specifically in Spain and in South America and in Mexico. And then interestingly enough, probably the biggest market for it would actually arguably have been Spanish-speaking people in the United States. So, you know, and I just read, because it's interesting, like once you start writing these things, you realize that, you know, I'm American. So I always thought like, oh, what does everyone sell in America? Let's do other things. But then once you start making financial projections, suddenly you realize why everyone wants to sell in the United States. It's just the amount of people with that level of income, it's kind of a no-brainer. So long-term residence is like, it's basically a no-brainer. And I will be eligible for that. So I actually went to renew my freelance visa for a second time, as I was telling you. I still don't have a resolution on that. Well, I know that it was renewed favorably, but their online system didn't download the letter for me. So I've been like trying to like track down the letter and you haven't been able to make an appointment to go and get your fingerprints made because of COVID. So my guess is by the time I get that residence card, I will probably already be eligible for long-term residency. So that's 5 years from the initial date. And from what I understand, it's a little bit like the renewal of mine was, where they basically just send you a letter, you check some boxes, probably fill out, you know, send them pay them 100 euros or something, and it's done. That's my guess. After that, to get to be a Spanish citizen, that's another 5 years out. So it's 10 years total. And there's not really an issue with that with the US because, okay, so technically you're not supposed to be a dual citizen of Spain, except for if you are from certain, I think, like former Spanish colonies. So basically all of South America except for Brazil and I think Dutch Suriname or something. But anyway, all of those people, you can be a dual citizenship. But you're not supposed to be, but I know a ton of Americans that have Spanish citizenships and they just go and the United States is like, we don't care. Because the United States is also the only country in the world, aside from, I think it's Liberia or Cote d'Ivoire, one of the two, that taxes on citizenship and not on residency. So because of that, it is almost impossible to get up a US citizenship. So like, I know a ton of people that have dual citizenships and US government just like, sorry, no. There are 3 or 4 different quasi bodies that you can submit to. I did one called, I think it's UPTA, UPTA, for the reason that they were able to meet me most quickly. Whereas all the other ones, you know, they had like the weird Spanish hours where they were all closed for lunch. They wouldn't get back to me. Whereas I emailed them, they emailed me back like 2 hours later. They're like, yeah, you can come down, you know. I'm like, great. So I went to them and I was extremely happy with them. I thought that they were very professional. I never had to wait. And that's to review the business plan. You don't have to do it, but I recommend doing it because they basically act as a filter for the Spanish bureaucracy. They know what they're looking for. So if they approve your business plan, it's basically kind of like the old process of having your business plan pre-approved with the entrepreneur visa. So I would encourage people to do it that way because they can tell you like stupid little things that like they would probably, like the Spanish, they wouldn't have denied my business plan because I had currencies in different, I had financial statements in different currencies, but they would have sent it back and it would have taken a whole lot longer for them to turn that around, especially the freelance process, than this semi-private agency did. There's others as well. And then some of them are like a lot more stringent than, because I talked to a couple of other people that used them and I was really surprised at the requirements that they had.
What was the length of your business plan for the freelancer visa?
It's about the same. In fact, it was probably a little bit more rigorous because I knew the business a lot better and I was able to make a lot more detailed things. And then I also had, I had client lists and like letters from clients that I was able to provide.